All right, go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Chapman, and I'm a member of the Alexandria City Council and the chairman of the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, the NVRC. Today, I and the NVRC welcome you to this webinar that will feature the work of a project in Hamburg, Germany, which I had the privilege of visiting last year, the Pergolenviertel. We would like to share with you the Pergolenviertel's special fusion of ecological design, co-location of social services, transit-oriented development, affordability, and other sustainability features that I believe could inform parallel work in the Northern Virginia region. I want to thank our guest and my host while I was in Hamburg, Hans-Peter and Micah, for their time and willingness to share the work of their remarkable project. Thank you to all of you for listening in on this webinar. I'm certain that you will come away with similar impressions of this exceptional project from which we can apply and learn here in Northern Virginia. Dale, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, John. My name is Dale Medeiros, and I'm a senior regional planner here at the NVRC. Like John, I had the privilege of visiting the Pergolenviertel last year. I was also moved by how the work of the Pergolenviertel has the potential to inform our region's climate resiliency efforts, especially as they relate to this really important issue of social inclusion. So through this webinar, we look to kickstart further conversations about how climate resiliency planning in Northern Virginia can learn from and apply lessons like those that are going to be shared this morning from the Pergolenviertel. Program's pretty straightforward. After I stop talking, I'll turn it over to Hans-Peter and Micah for them to share the slides of the work. We ask at the end that if you have any questions, you park them into the chat box. But Rebecca, who will facilitate the question and answer, will be happy also to entertain questions that you would like to address directly to the speakers. Let me introduce our two guests. Hans-Peter Boltres studied architecture and urban design at the University of Stuttgart and the University of Kansas, where he was an exchange student about 30 years ago. Peter's worked for the District of Hamburg North since 2002 in a variety of positions. He currently heads the department responsible for economic development, building, and environment. Since between 2007 and 2020, he was the head of urban planning and landscape design for the District of Hamburg North and oversaw the development of the Pergolenviertel. Maike Schwarz-Müller works with Hans-Peter. She's an engineer, but also trained as an architect and an urban planner. She had an apprenticeship in business administration. She also worked for 10 years in municipal consulting prior to coming over to Hamburg North to work with the Pergolenviertel. She's coordinated planning for the Pergolenviertel, among other projects in the district. She's now a team leader for the planning department in the Hamburg North district and likes to share the knowledge of her experiences in this particular project, not just with those in Europe, but also with us in North America. Thank you so much for your time. Hans-Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you, John, for the friendly introduction. And I'd like Micah to share the presentation. So as Dale told you, my name is Hans-Peter Boltres. I'm an urban planner, and I tried to take you on the journey we did with the Pergolenviertel. Next, please. In order to give you an idea where the city of Hamburg is located within Germany and how Hamburg is built on, you can see on the slide on the left side, Germany, and the little red dot shows the location of Hamburg. And the middle slide, the middle image shows you that Hamburg is divided into 7 districts. The one with the red point, Hamburg North, is the one Mike and I are working for. And just in order to give you an idea, we have about 313,000 inhabitants. So in European terms, we are a quite big city, but we are part of an even bigger city of 1.9 million inhabitants. We have a very differentiated public administration, and my department is in charge of all the urban planning on the local level. So we're doing all the urban planning on our district's area. And on the right image, you can see surrounded by this red line where the Pergolenviertel is located within the city. And on the next slide, I'll show you that we are in a very diverse and differentiated neighborhood. In the west, we have the so-called City Nord, which is a business district constructed in the 70s. The idea then was to have large buildings for large companies and a very lush green area surrounding all the buildings. And this site is a cultural heritage. Because it's one of the few sites in Germany or even in Europe that has been that has kept this idea of the Athens Charta from Louis Corbusier, which you definitely know. And on the right-hand side, we have an image of the so-called Jahrestadt, living a housing neighborhood in the area dating from the 1920s. And as you can see in the scheme down there, we have a very specific and quite typical urban fabric, which has quite an importance for the history of Hamburg. And as Michael will show you, is like the guidance line for what the Pergolenviertel is today. And on the next slide, you can see that in 2010, on the aerial view on the right side, this whole area was covered by allotment gardens, nearly 330 of them. And this could be the way it was because this site was supposed to be an inner city autobahn, so a rapid transit street in the 60s and the 70s. And it has been used as informal residential area after the World War II, when Hamburg has been destroyed severely. And you can imagine that starting to plan over allotment gardens is quite a complicated task. That shows the picture with the lady and the gentleman with this garden figure. So we had to face quite a lot of controversy when we started this project. And then the next one. So what was our starting point when we began thinking about the Pergolenviertel? We have still a huge need of social or public subsidized housing in the city, because we are in a city with a very, very dynamic growth. We are very attractive for many young people from all over the world. And that's why we are constantly looking for new housing and densify existing housing sites. The whole area was owned by the City of Hamburg, which gave us the opportunity to to start planning without having to take care of private ownership, except for the ownership of the gardens, which is well, not really ownership, but they have sort of right to inhabit the allotment gardens. We have 2 stations of our public rapid transit in nearby, so we are very effectively connected to the railway system of the city, and it takes us like 10 minutes to get, or 15 minutes to get to the center of the city. And we always think that garden allotments is a very privileged land use and should be well regulated more than it used to be until now. And we find that one allotment equals almost 18 apartments. So you can see this relation makes it easy to argue that maybe in a growing city with this badly need of social housing, there is a strong bias for the houses and against the private allotments. As we are a very densely populated district, we don't have any spare areas where we could do new big developments, and the areas we have are all very green or have important ecological issues. So it's really hard to find areas where we can facilitate the building of new housing. And from the beginning, climate change and climate adaptation was a big issue in the whole programming and the whole development of this project. And from the beginning, we tried to do as many measures we could in order to face climate change and adaptation. So that's why we tried to keep most of the big trees in the areas, don't cut any of them, in order to meet this this issue of climate adaptation, but also to keep the genius loci to work with the existing substance in the area. And of course, from the beginning, this is a hard thing to say within US American audience, but we are quite restrictive with private mobility by cars. Because we think we have to push back cars from our cities. They consume too much space. They pollute our airs, and there's no right for public cars to be parked in public space. So that are the starting points and the key issues we started with. And now I hand over to Maike, which is in charge of the project since the beginning, and she can tell you much more than I could about the project. So Maike, the floor is yours.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, as Peter mentioned, right now this area, as you can see here, the zoning or development plan is from 1961, and it shows the autobahn to the airport and sport facilities, which were planned again and again when the City of Hamburg applied for the Olympic Games. But however, these plans were never implemented, and so residential use was laid down in the land use plan since 1997, shown here filled in red. But we had to change these plans because Pergolenviertel should be something else than this. So when I started working at the district office in 2010, the general approach for the development of the area was fixed, but the content had to be worked out, and this was largely created in a dialogue with various interest groups and authorities. These are the first 3 steps that are shown here, but I will show them later again a little bit more detailed. This was the master planning process from 2010 to 2011 in the summer, almost a year with many discussions with many different stakeholders, and it defined after this process building or construction area for up to 1,400 apartments. Also the entrance and access of the streets to the quarter, and it should be very economical development for traffic, for private traffic, because yeah, that costs a lot and doesn't make sense that much. So also it showed the trees that had to be preserved, and 6 acres for the allotment gardens, which had to be put on this area again. There were, as Hans-Peter mentioned already, 320, and it said the half of them had to be in the Pergolenviertel later on. So this is what the master plan shows here. On the next slide, it was clear that after informing the public in the summer of 2011, and we developed together the goals for the development and prepared the planning competition with this vision, which is noted here. You can read by yourself. It is almost the same as Hans-Peter already mentioned. And the summer of 2012, we had this competition, and it produced 26 very difficult, different results from which Swiss architecture office called E2 Architects won the first prize, and thus the implementation of this, its outstanding design for the Pergolenviertel. They were we had them for the next 2 years with us, and we developed the plan together. And this is also the result of the competition. In the middle, you see their suggestions for the Pergolenviertel. And yeah, we think this is a very special design, because we have only one street from the north to the south in the northern part, and just one street with a little turnaround in the south of the Pergolenviertel. And also we have these allotment gardens, which are framed by pergolas. So you will see later a picture of them. And this was, yeah, very, very special design. All the others were different, as you see here, maybe a little bit. They were not so special. So this was the first prize. Yes, as Hans-Peter mentioned already, usually the planning now could be implemented, but as always, there are already resistance on site. The allotment gardeners organized themselves and formed an initiative. They were almost able to delay the process for 1 year. But then we found some agreements that facilitated the moving of the allotment gardeners, and so we could go on. And but also there are some regulations for the compensation, and that they were already fixed. We had, for example, the allotment gardens to be replaced one by one, and it takes 6.5 acres of land in the Pergolenviertel, and also, which I didn't mention here, 3.5 acres on the other parts of the city. And so that we could be able to replace these 330 allotment gardens. So also for nature elsewhere must create compensation areas in Hamburg. So this slide is particularly meaningful when it comes to developing new areas. You know that by yourself maybe, because each area is already occupied and used several times. We have to check everything. We have to talk to everybody, and we have all those different participants of the planning. And also with the allotment gardens, we had a lot of talking and stuff, and all the nature restrictions are here to see. And also we had to talk to housing professionals and about affordable housing and everything like that. You see, there are many, many different restrictions you have to talk about and find ways to go on with them. But after 2 more years, we had the new zoning plan in 2015, and you can see here, this is how we make those zoning plans, and the blue outlines are for the buildings, and the red spaces are for the living spaces, and the green areas are also for everybody and also for the allotment gardens, and the yellow ones are for streets and places. And a different process with the housing companies and the rector of the buildings of Hamburg called Oberbaudirektor and many other stakeholders. Design guidelines were drawn up for the large-scale format buildings, which redefine the architectural details of the outstanding housing project of the Jahrestadt, which Hans-Peter showed you, of the 1920s. These guidelines applied to the sale of the plot so that we could get a quarter here that forms an ensemble. So it's not every building by itself, but all the buildings together stand at the Pergolenviertel. The buildings of the Pergolenviertel are placed in the landscape, and the water seeps into hollows around those buildings. And the only public place is also a rainwater retention area where the water is released very slowly into the severe system during heavy rainfall events shown with the blue circle. As you see here, there is all the will be filled by water when there's a stormwater event. Here you can see once again the entire process, which was consistently accompanied by so-called planning advisory board from the public, shown here in orange color. So the public was with us all the time, and they controlled us, but also they gave tips. And after this process, they still meet in the forum, Pergolenviertel it's called now, and you see down here. And there are many people from the beginning are still here coming by to the forum Pergolenviertel and with us for almost 13 years now. So this is a very nice process. Sometimes we had some discussions, but all in all, it was a very nice dialogue all the time. The Pergolenviertel has been under construction since 1917, but it still grows, and it will grow until the end of 2024. Here you can see the different types of apartments. In green, you will find the social housing, and purple are condominiums, sorry, and in orange is rental apartments without subsidies, and blue are so-called building communities. These are people who know each other before building, and they are moving in together. Of course, everybody in their own apartment, but they are planning together, and so they know each other before they live together later. This is a very special process that we sell those plots only by concept, not only also by price, but also by concept. So the results of those tenders is that we have 22 property developers, including this Saga, the municipal housing company, 5 housing cooperatives, and 8 building communities that are primarily traditional property owners. So they don't sell the apartments, they just have them and hold them for the next 100 years maybe. Also, there were built almost 1.7 thousand apartments, of which are 60% subsidized housing, and including 150 housing units for various social housing forms. So there are communities that live together with only one kitchen and one living room, and everybody has their own bathroom and sleeping room, and they are assisted by some persons or companies which help them through the day. This is very special because very old people or people that have problems with their bodies or their heads, they are assisted and they can still live together with everybody else. Also, they were built, or they will be built, 200 student apartments as social housing. This isn't here on this slide, but it's social housing student apartments, and 300 daycare spots in the kindergartens, in 3 kindergartens, and 65% of the residential units are family-friendly sizes. So in Germany, in the next quarter, most of the residential units are only 1 room big, and so if you live together with 2 persons and you want to have a family, you have to move usually very far away. But in the Pergolenviertel there are many apartments with 3 rooms or 4 rooms or 5 sleeping rooms. This is so very good. And also the public participation is starting from the planning phase until the neighborhood now is inhabited, but also it goes on. This was one of the features. And beneath this dense social infrastructure, every investor had to give 1% of the price for a neighborhood management company, which is helping now to build networks in the community, so everybody knows each other. They have some summer parties together and stuff like that. And also they have a mobility station, and they promote bicycle traffic by different bicycles that you can rent there for the day. And yeah, they are networking and stuff that I already said. And the next one is also, you can see now in 2021, the first buildings are built. In the south, it's not that full now, but by now in 2023, the buildings in this house are also, the people are living in them right now already. And only here in the north, there's one big building with the 200 student apartments, which is built right now. And also there will be a big supermarket for shopping daily needs. So this is an impression of the Pergolenviertel in the north. And you also see here the allotment gardens and the station of the S-Bahn. It's called Rübenkamp, where you can get off and go down, and so you don't need a car. You can just leave and take the public transport. And here you see it from the east, a view from the east, and you see in the background, you see the city north, which Peter mentioned at the beginning. And also you can see, you can walk through everywhere. So you can go by foot all the time. And here's one picture from the north. And the buildings are 3 to 8 stories high. So here you can see one building which is very low with only 3 stories, and the other one here is 8 stories. So you have very different situations when you live here, and overviews, or a big courtyard in the one which is smaller. And we like that because it isn't very boring. It's very interesting. So you can see the bricks that were used for the houses, and also you see one of the courtyards on the left hand side. And the very special thing about the courtyards is that there are big trees now, not in the picture, but now, because the underground parking lot has a cutout, so the trees can take roots into the ground. So that's very nice, and this is every courtyard in this Pergolenviertel is like that. can see some more impressions, and also you see the pergolas first time now, which surround the allotment gardens, and these are giving the name to the Pergolenviertel. So because if it wouldn't were named Pergolenviertel, those pergolas wouldn't be there because they had to be financed, and if you don't had this reason of the name, you wouldn't have get them financed. So this was one of the things that we developed in the development process. Here you can see a bicycle highway that runs past the Pergolenviertel, next by on the west of the Pergolenviertel. And this is where you can go to the airport very fast. I think it's like 10 to 15 minutes to the airport and 10 to 15 minutes to the city of Hamburg, the city center. And also there are many distinctive features of the Pergolenviertel, many rooms that you can share. This is the picture on the left, which shows the common areas that they can be rented by the residents for yoga or children's birthday parties or stuff like that. And on the top you see the mobility port, which we call it, where you can rent bicycles. And in the middle, once more, the bicycle street or the bicycle autobahn, where you can drive very fast. On the right-hand side, you see a kindergarten with its outside area, and yeah, on the down on the right side, you see a swimming pool, which is an absolute novelty in Hamburg that this was built, because new swimming pools are usually only in private houses or in hotels or stuff like that. But this is of a swimming school, and everybody, the public, can use it for a fee or some sport events. So this is very, very special, and yeah, everybody is amazed by this pool. And this is a new brochure you can find on the internet. There's the link down below, and I guess you can translate it in the internet safely, but it's only in German. So, but maybe this describes the whole planning process once again. This is the fact sheet of which I already mentioned, so you can look at it afterwards if you want to have some facts very fast. And there are some more informations that you can find on this website. And yeah, that's it from me. And I would like to close it now. And maybe if you want to come back to some of the slides, we go back later. You can ask the questions now.
Well, great. Thank you both so much. Looks like we do have a few questions in the chat, although it looks like Hans-Peter has answered them regarding tree species and considerations for choosing certain trees. Maybe to get us going, and folks can go ahead and put some questions in the chat, but Hans-Peter did mention, right, the choice of trees to mitigate heat impacts. Micah, could you talk a little bit further about choices in your design to mitigate extreme heat?
Yeah, maybe or Hans-Peter can tell something more about it. It's extreme heat is not one of the major parts of this design, but also because the buildings are placed in the landscape. Everything is green around these buildings and inside the courtyards, and so I guess that's one of the parts that will help to manage the heat. But Hans-Peter maybe has some more ideas.
Yeah, well, as I said, we tried to keep as many trees, existing trees, as we could. That's the one thing. The other thing is that all the roofs are green roofs,
Yeah.
so we can both keep the water and do something for the microclimate. So it's proven that green roofs can change the microclimate and cool down the next area. And we have a very small footprint of the buildings. So as you may remember, in the overall scheme, only a very little part of the whole area has been built, and very much of the green space has been kept. So that's the major way, or the way we dealt with urban heat isle effects. And but fact is that urban heating is not the major issue in our part of the country, because we are quite near to the Baltic and the Northern Sea. And maybe we have to mention that we have a sort of, I don't know how to translate it, we have a study for the whole city where the cold air is flooding into the city. And part of the design has been proven that it doesn't block the major winds that come from the north side. So those are the issues, or the measures we took. And the organized opposition, I read right now. Maybe I'm not the right person to to address this issue, because it was a very hard start that we had, and we have a political system that is very which is based on representativity on the district level. So we have a very down-to-earth political resemblance that is in charge of accompanying all these communication and participation processes. And we had professional teams that were doing moderation and negotiation between the planning issues, the planning teams, and the other stakeholders. And yes, it was a pretty collaborative process, and that is probably one of the key contributions that Maike had to the process, because she has a very kind and very geduldig, how do you say that? Oh, she's very patient with people, and she addresses people very directly and friendly. And I think always in those participation processes, the way you address people and the way you meet and gather with people is half of the success. So I think that is very important, or that has been very important. And I think the transparency in the whole process. So what are we doing? Why are we doing things? What are the scientific issues we are dealing with, like water management and traffic and mobility? So we had a huge amount of studies and expertise from outside that we shared with all the people. So people could learn together with us that we're not not doing the things that come into our minds, that every step is very very good thought of. And I don't know how to express it, but I think transparency, friendliness, openness, and patience. Yeah, patience is a big issue.
And it's all about cookies and coffee, I always say, because if you don't give some
you
cookies and coffee,
always have some
and drink.
cookies and something to drink, and everything's okay. And the inputs from all the stakeholders. You have to know that we have a very democratic planning system in Hamburg and in Germany. So we have a very good organized process with defined steps where all the public stakeholders can communicate their issues. And so you have, from a very early start of the project, you have most of the issues, they are public. So, and then you have to deal with them. And it's sort of a negotiation process, and that is the main part that the urban planners in Germany have to deal with. They have to make deliberate decisions about what is the main issue now. And this is a very transparent process. So every single decision planners take is publicly debated. So that's why probably we are not scared about these. I think it's about 80 to 100 stakeholders that we have to put into the planning process. We are used to it, and it's very tiresome. I have to admit that it's very tiresome because most of the stakeholders are having only one issue they're in charge for. So we have people that are considering only the water issue, and others only the trees and the birds, and the other ones. So you understand what I'm saying. So our impact on the planning process is to put those things together and try to find decisions. And we're not deciding because our local parliament is taking the decisions, and they have been very useful in this whole collaborative process because they were part of it as well.
And also we bring those people together, which are different needs and different types of topics, and they sit together and then they see, oh, when my topic is the most important, and the other one topic is also the most important, and next one is also the most important, there's no planning possible. So maybe some of the people think about it sometimes. So.
That the question about if Hamburg, does Hamburg being a city-state make urban planning easier? Not at all. I would assume it makes it more complicated because we know each other very well. And I don't think it makes it easier, but we have a very profound tradition. We have a very profound planning tradition from the early 20s. And we're used to it more than others maybe. And this effort was founded by the city. We told you that the whole area was owned by the city. And we have an organization which is in charge of managing city property. And they were part of the process, and they funded all the studies and the expertise, and of course the whole communication process. And it turned out that they made a good deal. Let's say it like this.
Everything was very down to earth. We didn't need much money, so we just met and had some rooms.
And again, I have to say we didn't have an external planning company that did the job. We did it on our own. Of course, with the expertise of different people that did the studies for us, but the whole project management and the whole organization was actually led by Maike. You need good people.
And some other people. They worked with me, so everybody was engaged and worked very good.
Yeah.
Great. Any additional questions? Feel free to either raise your hand or put the question in the chat box. I guess another. Oh, go ahead, Dale.
Lori Jean Taylor had a question on the funding.
I think they answered that. It sounds like the city was able to fund most of it. Another question is, obviously this work is still ongoing, but have you seen any of this being replicated in other areas of Hamburg or in Germany in general?
Well, not yet, because I think the urban design is quite specific to this site. So you can't replicate it, but you can replicate the process, and you can replicate the what Mike mentioned, that this design guideline is being implemented in the selling of the plots. So that seems to be a model that many or more cities are adopting. And as we are not finished yet, or almost finished yet, the press and well, it's starting getting publicated more and more all over Germany. We had a big magazine that is well, the leading media for urban design just published a quite big article last Friday. So it's getting more known, and we won a small prize, but it's a German prize, so with different projects from other cities. And yeah, well, and I think Micah and I are doing a lot of tours and lectures all over. So and I think the whole process of dealing with the allotment gardening scenery is quite prototypic for all sorts of projects that we have. We have ongoing a big project which again affects lots of allotment gardens, and the stakeholders that are in charge of the gardeners are referencing to the Pergolenviertel project. So it seems like there's quite a lot of knowledge transfer going on.
Great. It looks like we have 2 more questions in the chat, and then we may have to wrap up. But what other cities do you see creative planning being done? Perhaps this could be in Germany in particular.
Well, I think not in Germany, but I think Copenhagen is the most interesting city in Europe at the moment, because they deal with the whole climate adaptation and climate change things in a very, very, almost avant-garde way. And they're dealing with landscape and water, and so I think they're pretty much upfront at the moment. And in Germany, I don't know, there are many cities like Munich or even Frankfurt, Leipzig. So all the bigger cities in Germany have a very very good planning culture. So and there is much interchange between us in those planning processes. And Dale asked if Mike and me worked with other cities or development projects in the US. No, we didn't. You're the first ones.
And maybe one last question from Lori Jean is, how is the housing managed now that it's built? Is it rental incomes that are tied to incomes?
Yeah, 60% of them are tied to incomes, and they have to have some kind of paper for that. So they go to the housing company and they get one of those reduced priced apartments. But as you know, the housing market in Hamburg is very tight, so all the flats were rented before they were built. So and everybody didn't think about mobility. That's one of the things that we have to learn, or lessons learned, that with a tight market, nobody thinks about leaving the car behind. They all brought their cars, and now there's not much space for the cars, and everybody said, oh, I didn't know that, but they had to, usually they should have known that, but they didn't think of it because they just wanted to live somewhere. And that's, we couldn't look for the best rental people, but everybody came, and now everybody's happy that lives there, and that's the most important thing.
Well, great. I think with that, unless somebody has one last quick question, we can go ahead and wrap it up. But thank you both again for speaking on this. It is especially relevant in Northern Virginia, particularly with your conversation around mobility and transportation planning. A lot of lessons learned for us over here. So with that, thank you to everybody else for attending today. I hope you found it as informative and interesting as I did. And following this presentation, slides, as well as a recording of the webinar will be posted to NVRC's website. So thank you all and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.